Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Teresa de Grobios is the #1 international best-selling author of Mass Influence, The Habits of the Highly Influential, which is now a bestseller in 7 countries. As the founder and chair of the Evolutionary Business Council, Teresa works with people around the world wanting to create grassroots change in communities and businesses. Welcome to the show, Teresa. So how are things in you're no longer here in Canada, you're in Costa Rica now, right?
I live in Vista Mundo, Costa Rica, and having a lot of fun with it, actually. It's been a great place to ride with the pandemic, that's for sure.
Yeah, I heard Costa Rica was a really good place to ride out the pandemic, especially since it's tropical. You don't have to worry about shoveling up any white stuff.
So you can pick your dinner out your front door.
So I know you've always helped authors become bestsellers, and you have a number of different ways of helping people become more influential. And so what is your favorite way to help people gain more influence and help their communities?
Well, my favorite way is absolutely the Evolutionary Business Council. It's actually a community that I started to big things in the world, just committed to creating change, mostly at a grassroots level, but people who are creating businesses to create a more conscious, sustainable world. And we help them work together to create energy and buzz around each other's work.
Yeah. You have a huge following with that, right?
Yeah, the collective reach of our members is over 500 million people. So it's kind of cool when you can bring an army of we actually call them light workers.
Mm-hmm.
Tracker Club reach. A lot of our members have used that number to get book deals, or movie rights sold to their books, or things like that. Just because they can say they're part of a community that reaches that many people.
Yeah. I imagine that it even helps like the lowly little podcasters like myself.
I wouldn't call you lowly, Michael. I love your show. So there's a lot of good in the world.
Yeah. You've referred a number of people to actually come on to this show, so it's always an honor to have you come on and talk about the wonderful things that you do for people, and you do for our global community, because a lot of people talk about you. So, what is somebody, because the Evolutionary Business Council, that's a big step, and how do you help people get prepared for that step?
Well, it really starts with understanding how influence works, right? And I like to talk about influence almost like it's highly influential set of habits and things all the time. But a lot of people are in basketball your whole life, and somebody suddenly sticks you on a hockey rink. It can be a little discombobulating. But if you understand how hockey works, hockey can be one of the funnest, easiest sports to play. As Canadians, we all love it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just a matter of really learning how influence works and learning how to create energy and word of mouth around whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. So it goes back to, as you say, grassroots, word of mouth. That's always going to be a grassroots way to start anything, right?
Yeah, it really all comes down to relationships, right? A word of mouth epidemic is nothing more than 200 influential people all talking about your work all at the same time. That's all a word of mouth epidemic is, right? and so to create that, really all you need is relationships with really influential people. That's really all it comes down to, right? And I don't mean like pandering or being inauthentic. Like I don't mean doing whatever it takes. It doesn't matter whether you admire them or like them. I mean authentically finding the people that you do like and admire. Authenticity is really important to influence, right? And then building a relationship with them, helping them with what they need, giving them the chance to offer you support back. It's all around reciprocity, and when you start to understand how influencers use reciprocity, it becomes very easy to become influential yourself.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell everybody a little bit of a story, because we've had some pretty big name people come on our show, and there's been a couple of those people that it's like you know how you have that starstruck moment.
Yeah.
But the reciprocity comes when you push past that, and you're no longer, and you're talking to that one person one-on-one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different definitions of authenticity out there. A lot of people talking about authenticity. My definition of it is just your inside voice is saying the same thing as your outside voice. That's all authenticity is, right? So when we meet somebody really influential, and we go into all that inner chatter, like, oh my God, or some people go into, this is my one shot, I'm meeting Oprah Winfrey, and, or I'm meeting Ellen DeGeneres, right? We've had that experience, right?
Yeah.
And then we get weird, right? Because all that inner chatter is going on, and suddenly our inner voice is saying something different than our outer voice, and our authenticity goes away, right? So when we learn to calm that freaked out inner voice that's saying, oh my God, this person's really influential, this is my one shot, and say, no, just relax, just build relationships, see what they need, see what they want, If you build a relationship, it's not your one shot, and you can relax, right, and all that inauthenticity goes away.
Yeah. You bring up a good point. If you're in the room with this person and it's over a cause, whatever the cause might be, because I know you get involved with quite a number of causes, and of course, on my end, human rights activist and human rights broadcaster, as well as influencer. When you're in the room and everybody's talking about human rights, you don't want to sit there and talk to a TV star about their next episode. You want to talk to them about the human rights that's going on and why you're actually there in the room, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's all about being of service, right? Like when you come from a place of love and service for other people, so if you're speaking to someone really influential and they've got a cause, help them with the cause, right? Like, influential people, and this is why I love your show, because you shine a light on so many people's causes. There's a lot of very famous people out there, but they can't get attention for their causes. Isn't that ironic, right? Because their show or whatever doesn't necessarily broadcast to their cause. So they love it when radio shows and TV shows put them on to interview them about the cause that they support, right? And so, I love what you do, Michael, because you shine a light on all the background conversations we should be having in society, right? Especially those subtle conversations, like human rights. It's funny, the first 20% of the work that gives you 80% of the result, like the stuff that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did, the stuff Gandhi did.
Yeah.
It was such a profound shift that a lot of people felt like, oh, well, now we're done, right? It's like, no, wait a second, we're not done. It's just gone underground, and it's gone subtle, And now we're into the part of human rights violations that is much harder to work on because they're harder to see, they're more insidious. And if we don't have shows, out there really talking about that stuff and really getting after it, like in the Evolutionary Business Council, we don't do whole programs on unconscious bias because as leaders, we need to take on our own unconscious bias if we're going to be out there leading the transformational conversations of the world, right?
Right.
So it's so important to have shows like this. It really is.
Yeah. So it's also good, like, you have taught me things about when you step into a room that it's like, oh yeah, well, I know Teresa supports that cause, and you're looking to get some traction towards it. Why don't I introduce the two of you?
Yeah, it's something that influential people do all the time, right? Connecting people who can help each other, right? And you've connected me with so many people now, Michael, too, right? Something I deeply appreciate. I think that's why you and I have become such good friends, right? Because when you meet other people who get how influence works, and the currency influencers play by, and I mean those who are really out to cause shift and change in the world, is they help each other get more influential, right? They give each other more attention. They give each other kudos, nominate each other for awards. I don't know what, shout each other out on their social media. If somebody's doing good work in the world, help them. That's where influence comes from, right? And I so appreciate everything you role model, Michael, because it's a living, breathing example of how influence should work. Helping other people shine a light on good work.
Yeah, and of course, when I went into I was at an event, and I was in the back room of the event, and somebody was sitting there talking about, oh, you have to see her. She's this funny, crazy lady from the Canada prairies, and she has this wonderful smile, and she just knows how to turn a room on and get people to talk about a certain topic that you need to be talking about at the time. I was like, and I looked at this particular author, and I believe his last name is Canfield. And I said to him, are you talking about Teresa de Grobios? And he's like, you know her? I was like, oh yeah, we've been friends. At that point, we've been friends for a couple years. And I said, she's absolutely wonderful. And it's like, I don't know of any person who can turn a conversation in a room to a certain topic, just by stepping in and connecting a couple people along the way.
Oh, thank you.
So it's amazing people like that.
You can even do it from your own stage or your own platform or whatever, right? Like, I think a lot of people get messed up in thinking their social media is to promote their own business or their own work, right? And your social media or wherever you hold your influence, right? Everybody has influence. Everybody has a group of people that know, like, and trust them enough that they'll take action based on what they do, right? Everybody's got it. But your social media is so much better in service of building relationship with other influencers by shining a light on their good work, right? And when you do that, and I think that's why, so many people offer to have me speak on their stages, because I always find out, like, what does the host need? What is the host trying to promote? What do the other speakers need? What are the other speakers trying to promote? And I try and weave all that into what I'm talking so that all of it becomes a beautiful, cohesive energy of what we're trying to create in the world as a group, right? And it's such a simple thing to do. It's just so many of us don't think to do it. And you can do that at any level, right? Like, even if you work in corporate and you go into your next meeting, be the person in a room that shines the light on the good work and the good contributions of everybody in the meeting, and watch what happens to your influence in that meeting. It's quite amazing when you actually watch that energy take shape.
Yeah. It can be amazing things, right? You once said, because you've been on the show a couple times, you once said that sharing influence was like sharing just about anything else, like respect or I guess we could go down a list of things that people look for in order to feel like they're wanted in a community. And you said the influence was one of those things that the more you try to share it with people, the more you actually gain.
Yeah, I like to talk about influences a lot like breathing, right? And there was a time we all had to learn how to breathe, right? Like we came out of that beautiful warm environment. Somebody whacked us on the back, we cried for a moment, and then we mastered the skill of breathing, right? And then by and large, we never thought about breathing again. We never went through our day thinking, oh my God, I got to breathe 24/7. Where am I going to find the time? Like that just wasn't even a thought we had, right? And then as we got older, we may have learned, oh, there actually is an advanced level of breathing. Like if I'm doing a martial art or yoga or Qigong, you can actually use the breath to support certain things. And we learn there are advanced levels of breathing. But in general, once we master breathing, we don't worry about, am I breathing right? Right? It's just not even a conversation. And influence is a lot like that, right? In the same way, if you want to get respect, you give respect. If you want to get influence, you give influence. It's such a simple paradigm, but it's true. And it's a lot like the reciprocity of breathing, right? You give influence out, that pulls influence back to you. You give influence out, that pulls influence back to you. And it becomes this beautiful cycle that you start walking through your day through. One of the reasons I wrote my book was that there were so many good people out there, everyday heroes, just trying to create grassroots movements or do really good things in the world, but they didn't understand how to create energy around what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted those everyday heroes to learn that, influence is not only easy and simple to gain, it's also important, right? Your work deserves to have influence around it. Because, what are we here for if it's not to better humanity and leave a legacy behind us?
That is an important point. Which brings me to a question of how do you want to better humanity?
Well, personally, I don't think we're going to get after any issues. And, the United Nations themselves have talked about this, that they'll never achieve their goals for sustainability unless we first achieve a conscious world, right? And by conscious, I just mean people who are able to challenge their own inner dialogue and really look at, like, what are those unconscious beliefs I'm walking around with? Like, you want to get after racism, you need to tackle unconscious bias, because I don't think the world has very many racists left in it, right? I mean, they still do exist, but by and large, racism is upheld by people who have unconscious bias they're unaware that they even have, right? Our very system of laws and regulation was set up in the time of colonialism and monarchs, where slavery or different classes of people, even if slavery didn't exist in those countries, different classes of people exist, and the very notion that some people were better than others was built into the very system of laws and regulations that all of the countries on this earth now operate under. Think about that for a minute, right? So how much unconscious bias is built right in to the way we operate, and we're not even seeing it because we're unconscious to it, right? And so until we become conscious to the point where we can challenge not only the way we think, but the belief systems that we've set up in society, we're never actually going to get after issues like racism. We're not going to have an end to war. A conscious planet would never allow war to happen, right? A conscious planet, that would just be not even in the realm of, are you kidding? Like, war? What? Like, that's not a way to solve problems, right? So as we spread more consciousness, more sustainable thinking on this planet, all of those other solutions start to fall away. So that's the reason I created the Evolutionary Business Council. Our vision is a conscious, sustainable world, and we seek to achieve that by helping thought leaders and emerging thought leaders, those grassroots people that are pushing out new ideas and new ways of thinking, to become more influential and more profitable so that they can have more impact in the world.
Wow. That is so true. If we were conscious, we would have seen, because we're in that time frame right now where one country is attacking another. We would have seen that leader ahead of time, before he got to the point that he was massing troops. We may not even have a need for troops or soldiers. And I know a lot of soldiers would love to be out of work.
We would challenge the very system under which we govern ourselves if we were a more conscious world, right? Because many of the ways that governments and systems were set up in a time where class structures and class thinking allowed for corruption in government and how we do things. So, the irony is, like, if you look at things like law enforcement, there's many people in law enforcement that believe the system needs to change. Like, they're as frustrated with it as the people who say outside the system who say law enforcement needs to change, right? So, I think there is a growing movement toward people who can see the biases of society and see where our unconscious interactions that we're not even noticing in the way we do business, the way we operate, are actually affecting everything in our lives. Our relationships, our business, the way we operate as communities, the way we operate as countries.
Yeah. What's his name? I can't think of his name right now. His last name is deGrasse Tyson, but I can't think of his first name. Anyway, physicist.
Neil deGrasse Tyson. Yeah.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Fan of it.
Yeah. I was a fan of his, and I'm a fan of his mentor, Carl Sagan. But Neil deGrasse Tyson said this, that we should question everything. What do you think about that thought?
I love that. I'm a huge fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson. And, one of my favorite things he says is that it's equally intellectually lazy to believe something like crystal bowls can cause healing, as it is intellectually lazy to believe that they don't. Right? And as a society, we've become intellectually lazy, and maybe we always were. And now as society's evolving, we need to realize, humanity on the average starts out from an intellectually lazy place, and we need to really start challenging the way we think, right? And if there is a possibility that something's true, don't we have the responsibility as society to be in the inquiry of whether or not it is true? I think one of the saddest things that I think this pandemic has done is that it's created a certain amount of righteousness in society, like we're right and you're wrong. Like it's interesting to me to see how people who disagree with vaccinations are being treated right now, almost like they're a lower class of people. And I understand sort of the scientific and regulatory reasons for doing that. But there's a righteousness coming about in society that's causing us to get lazy and stop looking at the full gamut of science, right? And as soon as we start saying this science is right and that science is wrong, now that's a slippery slope, right? Now we're in the realm of propaganda, and propaganda is often used to start creating violations of human rights, or like Hitler had all kinds of evidence to say that certain people were lesser in society than others. It was all bogus science, but he funded science to try and prove what he was saying was true, right? So just because something is got a few scientific studies around it doesn't mean we shouldn't challenge it. As human beings, we have to stop being intellectually lazy.
That is true, and I think that we are coming into another time of awakening with that. We need to question everything. It's I've received hate mail because I questioned some of the reasons behind what was going on with the pandemic. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, nor am I pro-mandate It's like, wait a second, just stop and think about it. Do we need to take all the action, or should we not take, or should we find some place in the middle, right? And we hit a time where people don't want to think, and that's something that you've been trying to get people to do since you started the Evolutionary Business Council, was to get people to just wake up and think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And notice what we're telling ourselves, right? Like it's the conversation. Like here's the really fascinating thing about human beings, right? There's actually a lot of research now showing that most people create their most significant self-limiting beliefs at the age of 2 or 3 when we're first learning language. So in those very first failures that we have in life, we will create some story to make it make sense, right? So, we might tell ourselves, I'm too small, I'm too big, I'm too white, I'm too black, I'm too short, I'm a girl, I can't do that, nobody likes me, I'm not lovable. Like, we've got some kind of inner dialogue running around in the background. And if we don't start noticing that there's some kind of inner dialogue running around in the background, that actually becomes the lens that we see everything in life through. And ironically, that was created, like our ego was created by a 2 or 3-year-old version of ourselves, right? So I often, I like to do a lot of inner child work in the work we do in the Evolutionary Business Council, because there's a lot of people out there in the transformational or the empowerment movements that talk about we need to kill off the ego and get rid of the ego. And I'm like, no, wait a second. We don't kill off our inner child, right? But we've got to learn to fall in love with our inner child, because our inner child was the source of the very things that are limiting us in life, right? And we must learn to, make friends with our inner child. And, I like to say, give your inner child a new job description. I borrowed that from Jennifer Huff, by the way. I love her work. Mm-hmm. We've got to give our inner child a new job. That little inner voice has got to stop running around ringing the alarm bells all the time. Otherwise, a 2-year-old is driving the bus, right? And you want to have a more adult version, a conscious version of yourself making decisions, not a 2-year-old inner dialogue that's constantly saying, I'm not lovable, nobody likes you, or I'm too short, or whatever, right? It's not workable as an adult human being.
I hadn't thought of it going back to 2 years old, but that would be like the first words, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Yeah, that's really, that's a great thought. I just hadn't thought of that. So, how can we, how do we give our inner child a new job?
Well, it starts with, here's a great exercise I love to do. If you're listening, you feel free to do this. For the next 2 weeks, every night, pull out a journal and journal. Every time you thought about doing something bigger with your life in the last day, what came up for you? What inner dialogue? And every time you did something and it was hard, and you might have talked yourself out of it or defeated yourself in some way, what was the inner dialogue running around in your head? And just every night journal that, right? And you may start to see patterns, right? Like you might be consistently telling yourself, I'm not good with money, or I'm not good enough to get a promotion, or nobody's gonna listen to me. Nobody cares about what I say. Nobody's gonna listen to me. You're gonna start to see repetitive patterns if you constantly look at those places where you've got discomfort and things just aren't working for you, or you're afraid to put yourself out there. You're afraid to push into something bigger or better, afraid to be heard. And journal that every night, and then start seeing if you can see a pattern. And then here's where this exercise gets really juicy. Because if you can start to identify the first time that you ever said that to yourself, you could probably go back and retrace early memories that actually were the points at which those started. Like I can actually remember the point in time that I created one of my most significant inner dialogues, right? And when you start looking at where does that help you and where does it hinder you, right? Because one of my biggest inner dialogues I actually created around the age of 2-3. I'm not just Canadian, I'm Northern Canadian, right? Like I grew up in the backwoods, right? We used to spend our summers in a remote backwoods cabin We go in by boat every year, just in time to see the hatching of the little baby mosquitoes. Humor. One year we were just back from the cabin. And we're standing around the kitchen of our little 100-year-old house. The kitchen's packed with people. All my cousins are there. And everybody's buzzing with excitement because my grandmother's taking us to the movies. And that's a really big deal in our family. And I look across the room just in time to hear Mom say, "Teresa can't go. She's too little." And in that moment of utter devastation, I decide I'm too small to play with the big kids. And then that inner dialogue becomes true for me. Like most human beings who create a significant inner dialogue like that, I start spending all my time doing one of two things. I start spending all my time trying to prove that it's true, or desperately trying to prove that it's not true, or desperately trying to prove that or desperately terrified that it is true. Sorry. And that then becomes what's driving the bus, right? So when you do this exercise and you start to see these experiences that you had as a child, then you can forgive your little inner child for creating that, right? And give it a new job. My little inner child's new job now is to just be my cheerleader. Just cheer me on, right? Tell me I can do it and tell me I'm good. And it's the adult Teresa that gets to make the decision as to whether or not I can do something.
Right. That does kind of make sense. If we were to listen to, especially with the example you just showed with the inner child taking on the idea of I'm too small to do, you can fill in the blank of whatever it was to do. We can all just about all trace back something that in our lives that had that. So so you said now that the inner child now cheers you on, and Teresa, the inner Teresa now says that I can do it. I'm always the right size, or something like
exactly.
that.
Because here's the thing, right? Like, especially as a professional speaker, I often get invited to speak on stages all over the world. And, you walk out on a big stage. If I'm too small to play with the big kids that's running in the background, I am going to suck on stage, right? So I usually do a little bit of, like, I mentally connect with that little inner child inside of me. And I let her know she's safe. Like that, I let her know that I, the adult Teresa, have got this. That she does not have to be the one doing this. That it's me, the adult version of me, that's doing this. And I give her a minute to say, "Yay, go Teresa!" and cheer me on. And it's interesting. It's like a little mental exercise I do, but it makes the world of difference. Because if I was to walk out on stage and all that fear was running around in the background, suddenly my inside voice is saying something different than my outside voice, and I've got a big authenticity problem, and I'm going to suck on stage, right? So it's just important to understand that, we might have an inner dialogue that's running the show in the background, and as soon as we can start to identify it and identify that it was a very young version of you that created that, then you can start to transform that and transform your relationship with your inner child.
Yeah. Wow, that's an amazing thing to think of, our inner child, and how that becomes a control when it doesn't need to be a control.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Kids, I hear all the time how people say how scary it is to, one, go out on stage, or how scary it is to host something, or how scary it is, oh, I'm just too afraid to be a guest on that show. It's like, how do you talk to people so that they understand that you don't have to be afraid?
Yeah, public speaking is a higher fear than death for most people. I love that Seinfeld joke about that. At any given funeral, people would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy, right? So it's not uncommon, right? Because our inner dialogue flares up so high the minute we're in front of a room full of people, a room full of peers, or a room full of family. And it's usually a fear that they're going to judge us unworthy in some way, right? Judge us as not enough. And when we really look at what that fear is, it usually comes back to a really young memory of something, somewhere where we failed as a child. And the reality is, most audiences want you to succeed, right? In fact, in some cases, they flew a long way to be there, or they paid money to be at that event. They want you to be awesome on stage. They don't want you to fail. So why would you walk out there with that fear? Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, imposter syndrome, because I've been guilty of it. I have to say that, and I had another one of our friends who is a mentor said, Michael, you're here. You deserve to be here. That's why you're actually here. The universe said that. How do you help people deal with that imposter syndrome?
Yeah, and anyone who's playing a big game is probably struggling with imposter syndrome at some level, right? And that's just the belief that you don't belong here, you don't deserve to be here. For those who don't know what imposter syndrome is, right? That somehow you're faking it, right? And to some extent, sometimes to be really influential and put yourself out there, sometimes you do have to fake it till you make it, right? And the reality is, I love that you talk about this vulnerability, Michael, because I've struggled with it. Anyone who's putting themselves out there in the world has probably struggled with it, because the reality is good people everywhere have inner dialogue that's going to be challenged the minute they step into doing something really worthwhile, like something that really matters to them, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you think about it, as soon as we step into our dreams to really do something significant in the world, that's huge. Like, there's nothing bigger to us or scarier to us than our own dreams of doing something really important in the world, right? That's outrageously massive. And so, of course, that's going to challenge your inner dialogue to think you're not worthy, you're not big enough. Who could ever be worthy of their own dreams, right? In fact, the only people that don't have inner dialogue that tends to flare up in those moments tend to be sociopaths, right? They've got inner dialogue, some type of inner dialogue going on, right? So when you think about that, if we don't learn to take on our imposter syndrome, learn to take on that subconscious dialogue that's running along, then what's at stake is we risk leaving behind to our children a world led by the very leaders that we fear, right? So as everyday heroes, as everyday good human beings, we need to learn to get on top of our limiting beliefs, our negative self-talk, and do it anyway, and learn to love it. Like, if you're not scaring yourself, you're probably not doing anything worthwhile. That's the honest to God truth, right? If you're not putting yourself out there that people could criticize you or challenge you or tell you they disagree with you or whatever, then you're living within your comfort zone, and nothing ever good comes from living within your comfort zone from the standpoint of change or shifting society, right? I love that Mark Bernard Shaw quote, right? I'm probably going to get it wrong, but the reasonable man conforms himself to his life, therefore all progress relies on the unreasonable man. Right, and I realize, I think now, if he had been in the age of enlightenment, he would have said the unreasonable person. but it's still a powerful quote, right? Like, sometimes we need to be unreasonable and make ourselves uncomfortable and do it in spite of that dialogue that's running around in the background, and make friends with that inner child that created that dialogue so that we can actually do something worthwhile in the world.
Yeah. So, we're starting to run out of time. I know, right? I was having so much fun in your backyard. You messaged me about you had a gift for our listeners if they click through.
Yeah, I would love it if you want to find out more about how to become influential and embody influence. we have a 30-day influence challenge for you. It's just 30 days of complimentary exercises. They're just little short emails or 2-minute videos you watch, and then you focus on that exercise that day. So it's just to help you exercise your muscle of behaving like influential people behave. And you'll find at the end of 30 days, you won't recognize yourself. Your paradigm around how you flow through your day will have shifted. So if you come to massinfluencethebook.com, you can not only do the 30-day influence challenge, but we're also giving out the digital version of my book, Mass Influence, for free right now as a celebration that it's actually been on the bestseller list for 7 years now, in and out of the #1 spot in business marketing, yeah. So we're celebrating that. So we're giving the digital version of the book away for free at the moment. So if you come to massinfluencethebook.com, you can both get the digital version of Mass Influence and you can do the 30-day influence challenge to really help you get on top of it.
Yeah. Do you have any other programs that people should connect with to work with you?
Well, if you really do think that you're someone who is up to creating some grassroots change in the world and you're doing it from the context of business, I'd love it if you came and checked out the Evolutionary Business Council. Just let us know Michael sent you. If you're a listener of Michael Rubin, we know that you're the kind of person that is a fit for the Evolutionary Business Council. So, feel free to come and connect with us and come on one of our calls to find out about the organization, because we'd love to see you in the community if that's so.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for your time today. It's been always wonderful to see you. So, and you always get my brain working. So.
Likewise, Michael. I would come on your show any day of the week. I love what you do. I love what you stand for. I love the light you shine on the world. So thank you so much for having me on, and thank you so much for the stand that you are in the world. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for listening today, and please check out the Mass Influencer site for your book. Is it
massinfluencethebook.com.
Massinfluencethebook.com. And the Evolutionary Business Council. Trust me, all you have to do is Google search that, and you will find lots of information and all the right links to click on to connect with Teresa and the group that they are. Okay? So we will see everybody next time. All right.
That was so fun.
So I wish upon that shooting star.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.